This meeting is now being recorded. Good day and welcome to the WANA Webinar Series. As you will notice, all participants have been muted. If you have a question to ask, please send your question into the Q&A panel located at the bottom right-hand side of your screen or by pressing the three-dot option along the bottom and selecting the Q&A panel. Your questions will be answered after the presentation. If you have any technical issues, please send a private chat to the host, the directions of which you can find in the chat window. Thank you for joining. Please welcome Lisa from Fountain House and the WANA webinar team.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar, the 17th in the WANA Webinar Series. Today will be part 1 in a series entitled Clubhouses and Law Enforcement, Strengthening Our Relationship. As we all know, the topic of community interaction with law enforcement has garnered a lot of attention around the world and particularly in the recent months across the United States. As clubhouses, we must be aware of this issue in order to ensure our members receive the appropriate interventions when faced with a crisis situation that involves law enforcement agencies. Today, we will hear from representatives of Cora Clubhouse, Lexington House, and the Goshen Police Department, all from Elkhart County, Indiana, regarding the partnership they have developed as part of the Crisis Intervention Team, or CIT. At a future webinar, we will hear from Fountain House and their partners regarding the Care Response Initiative currently in development. We hope that you enjoy and learn a lot about this very important topic from our colleagues today. I will now introduce you to Francis Disori from Lexington House.
Hello, this is Francis, and want to welcome everybody to this webinar. It's a privilege to be here. As mentioned, I am the Executive Director of Lexington House of Elkhart, Indiana. Been in that position since 2020, the summer of, and prior to that, for many years, was the Director of the Community Mental Health Center for Supportive Program for Adults in Elkhart. Today, I want to share a little bit about our CIT program in Elkhart, which has been around for 14 years. To do that, I want to bring it into the scope of Elkhart, Indiana. Some of you may not have traveled here or know much about Elkhart. Elkhart is in Indiana, the northern part. We're about 100 miles east of Chicago, west of Detroit, and north of Indianapolis. We are also known as the RV capital of the world. There's a lot of RV manufacturing here. The county itself has about 205,000 people. There are 92 counties in the state. Two major cities are Elkhart, Indiana, with about 52,000, and Goshen, Indiana, which has 34,000. We're 15 miles apart. Both those cities have clubhouses. And we're all part of a larger group of clubhouses in a coalition of 12 in Indiana. So we're part of the coalition in Indiana. Today, we'll be sharing information from Officer Ballard, who's been part of the CIT energy and program for many years, it seems, since his training. And we'll be talking with members of Cora House and also their Executive Director, Rich Myers. They'll be coming on a bit later. So at this time, I'd like to open up and bring the first slide up, if that's possible. So being the keeper of the story of the CIT program in Elkhart, Indiana, I'll give a minute just for those who may not be familiar with Crisis Intervention Team program, time to read through this. There are 6 slides that I will go through. And when I'm finished, I will pass on to Officer Ballard, who will talk a little bit about his experience with CIT, Crisis Intervention Team. As you can see from the screen and the slide, CIT offers training, but it is not all about training. The base to that is the partnership of coalition of partnerships among the stewards of the mental health of the county or the city. The main goal is for this, we'll get to the next slide, for the CIT Crisis Intervention Team, is to reduce incident out in the community when there's a mental health crisis. So we offer officers primarily who attend our training information to give them more tools for their toolbox. One of the things we learned back in the early days of our CIT program is that officers, when they would come out of academy, had less than 2 hours of training around mental health. And then, of course, they would rely on their own experiences, both personal and prior professional experience. So we had room to add and give more information to our community law officers. Another part of that is the Memphis model has been around since 1987, gave birth in 87, came out in 88, and really is the gold standard for the CIT program. The next part in this slide is the reason for having a CIT and the basic goal. So we'll take a minute and review that. And yes, unfortunately, the CIT program here in Elkhart back in 2006, 2005, there were some situations that arise that were brought to the attention by the Community Mental Health Center and NAMI and said, we can do better. And that's when we learned about the Memphis model, who unfortunately had the same experience that in their community, not very good outcomes happened when police came upon individual who was having a mental health crisis. Can we go to the next slide, please? So at the base of a CIT program is the broad community partnership. And in Elkhart, we're very blessed. There are plus 20 agencies now who attend a morning call once a month on Thursday. And we connect. We connect in our fellowship and our responsibility as being stewards. We got outside our silos of only taking care of our part of the pie. And we realize that we are in this together. And we have a responsibility to our community and dialed in the humanity. And I have to tell you, firsthand experience of working with officers out in the field who have been CIT trained, it has been a delight because I've seen the backside of that and not so good. But on the front side, I have seen officers dial it back, go into the toolbox, use the de-escalation strategies, and move a person from, in the past, maybe going to the jail to going to a facility where they can receive good stabilization intervention, whether that's the ER, a mental health clinic, or to their family. Can we go to the next slide, please? So where does Clubhouse come in? Our Clubhouse here, Cordell House, dialed in to our program around 2016, and they really gave the voice of the individual, the member, our citizens of our community. We had a very good platform on training, but something was missing and we were stalling as a program and growing. What was missing was the people we were serving in our community. So when Clubhouse came in, our lens changed because we got outside of our silos. We were learning from members about what they brought to the table about police officers, but we're also learning about police officers and what they were bringing. And we got to know each other as a community. And we're pretty good at that these days of communicating between each other. We're going to talk a little bit about some strategies at the end. I think it's slide 6. May we go to the next slide, please? So I've alluded to our history. I think it's important to know history. So our energy started back in 2008 when NAMI, our Mental Illness Alliance, National Alliance of Mental Illness, came together with our local community mental health center because there were some challenges in our community that were not acceptable. So we formatted together and came and said, we're going to have this partnership. In 2008, we did our first training, and up till around 2016, we were on the map and radar, but we weren't dialing it in very well until Clubhouse came on the site. I want to credit Rich Meyer and the Clubhouse, Cora House, formerly known as Elkhart County Clubhouse, for bringing in and really being an accelerant to our program here in the county. Now, in 2021, it was kind of fun to being on the call in February. These are morning calls, 7 or 7:30, now Zoom. There are over 20 agencies on the call, and part of the criteria, a policy, not policy guidelines, is that people on those calls can make decisions on behalf of their agency or have access to people who can make decisions for their agencies. So, and there's a wide scope. We have judges who are on the call. We have chief of police who are on the call. We have mayors of our two cities periodically who come in, or someone from their office, and a range, and plus Clubhouse.
Francis, let's save the last slide, the next slide, for after we hear a couple stories, okay?
Rich and David, blessings. So in traditional Clubhouse challenges, we had some challenges, a learning opportunity, and they figured it out because we had to shuffle some of the cards because I was not the lead act. I was coming in around second or third. So I'm working through my slides. So we're going to go to the next slide, if you would. So what can you do in your community to take the first step? Reach out to your department, police department, to see if they even have a CIT program. And if they do, how can you connect? For us, it was very helpful to go to our capital down in Indianapolis and connect with the CIT consult, who has actually come up and done training, de-escalation training with us, and continues to be in consult with us. So I would say you're at the government level, state level, there is a CIT element, and you may want to dial in. Make connections with other agencies and organizations. We started out with 3 organizations. We're plus 20 now. We are the fabric of the mental health for this community. And it is very exciting when we get together. I will take and share this. Back a year ago, almost to the date, when COVID first came to our shores here in the United States, we had some challenges in Elkhart, like the rest of the country, if not the world. And we were trying to figure out how we take care of our homeless population, including those who have mental health challenges. So the city and the county of Elkhart First Response turned to CIT floorboard, or our network, saying, you guys can you figure this out? Can you help us? You have a very good network. So we were called to the table to work with our community at the county level to figure out this challenge. In addition to that, though, Clubhouse came into play because the program we put together, known as the Annex, ran with elements of Clubhouse built right into the program. And it worked very, very well. We had very little to no incident there. And the elements of work order day, supportive community went tremendously well. And I believe our community was surprised how we were able to do this. It was a combination of crisis intervention program and Clubhouse elements of, Clubhouse. And then finally, the third strategy, I would say, will present about Clubhouse to shift change, meeting at the police station. Cora House is starting this process that when there are shift changes between officers, they have been invited to go and talk about Clubhouse, but also to meet with officers. It's about a half hour to 45-minute window. Again, just human beings having conversations and having maybe some coffee to break down the barriers and realize this is our community and we're in it together. Finally, Rich is going to, at the end, talk about his slide and resources. I will draw your attention. There is a wonderful resource that is in both, and it is connected to the core elements of running a CIT program. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to, who am I going to turn it over to?
We've got it. We've got it here, Francis.
Very good, Rich.
A story from David George, member at our clubhouse, about the need for CIT training. Go ahead, David.
Hello, my name is David George. I'm about a 9-year member of the Elkhart County Clubhouse, now known as Cora House. I serve on the board there as well and am a NAMI certified peer-to-peer mentor. I also am experienced with interactions with the police as a mentally ill person. I have a story here that will illustrate the need for crisis intervention training and de-escalation. Some years ago, I was moving out of a girlfriend's house and evidently moving too slowly. She called the police. When they came, they asked me if I had a car that would speed things up, and I said, yes, I have a car, but I can't drive it. My glasses are broken and my license requires that I wear corrective lenses when I drive. One of the officers told me to go get the car. So I went, got the car, and when I returned, he had a citation in his hand for me for driving without my license. I thought this was really crooked and shady because he had told me to go get the car. But he insisted that I was going to get this ticket, and at that time, I had not been diagnosed as mentally ill and still had quite a temper problem. So my temper flared and it ended in a physical scuffle, which in the course of he was injured and added a charge of assault and battery on a police officer to me. Well, they are what I refer to as a cuff and stuff department, and that's what happened. I was cuffed and stuffed into the police car and carted off to jail. I believe that a crisis intervention trained officer, things might have been different, and I have a story later to show that difference and why crisis intervention training is such a valuable asset to our community. Thank you.
So next we'd like to hear from Officer James Ballard. Jim works on the Goshen Police Department. Jim, what is your perspective on the CIT relationships?
Good morning. As stated, I'm with the Goshen Police Department and an Elkhart County Crisis Intervention team member. I also serve as president of Lexington House Board of Directors. I prefer to be known as Jim, who just happens to be a police officer. I'm honored today to speak to you as a representative of Lexington House, the Elkhart County Crisis Intervention Team, Goshen Mayor Jeremy Stutzman, Chief Jose Miller, and the men and women of the Goshen Police Department. I want to discuss the benefits of establishing a partnership or partnerships between crisis intervention teams and programs such as clubhouses in your communities. Partnerships benefit not only clubhouse members, but those experiencing mental health crisis, law enforcement themselves, and our entire communities. Law enforcement and clubhouse partnerships can result in huge impacts for your communities, leading to improved quality of life. Partnerships open opportunities for dialogue, and they can help erase stigmas associated with law enforcement and mental illness. When we communicate, people and organizations listen and learn from each other. We tend to, when we communicate, we start to listen for understanding. The ability to de-escalate incidents, including those involving mental health crisis, is also a great benefit gained through partnerships. Providing social services in lieu of citations and education over enforcement strengthens public view of law enforcement as willing to help and not as strict enforcers of the law. In turn, recidivism, or the cycle of returning to jail, is also decreased through the offering of social services such as that provided by Clubhouse. Like I said, the revolving door closes, providing opportunities for people suffering mental illness a pathway to recover their lives. I want to bring home the importance of forming crisis intervention teams and clubhouses in your communities, as well as establishing partnerships between them. I recently retired from the Elkhart, Indiana Police Department after 23 and a half years. I last served as the downtown Elkhart mental health and homeless outreach liaison. I was not always the type of officer I am now. Crisis intervention training and being introduced to Clubhouse was definitely a positive career game changer for me. I had been a no-nonsense, do what I ordered you to do kind of officer. Failure to follow my orders often led to arrest. I was indeed the cuff 'em and stuff 'em type of officer David spoke of. I will not say there is not a time and a place for this mentality, because there is. What I will say is crisis intervention training, along with establishing relationships with stakeholders such as Clubhouse and Clubhouse colleagues, has provided me the expertise to competently de-escalate crises. Now, I want you to picture a man sitting at a picnic table all alone. It's a hot August day. An officer stops and begins to speak with the man, introducing himself by first name and asking the man his first name. Concern is expressed. Breakfast is purchased and a cooler of water provided. I was the officer involved in this incident. I learned many things that day through the simple gesture of sitting down at a picnic table across from a person, eating a meal, and simply listening. He had suffered a physical injury, lost his job, his relationship, and his home. I let him know where he could find available social services and encourage him to take advantage of them. I gave him my contact number. I did not try to fix him or tell him what he needed to do. And then I left, thinking nothing more of it. Several months later, I was called into the lobby of the police department. There stood the same man. He told me he had been contemplating suicide the day that I spoke to him. He said through word and action I had shown him someone still cared. He went on to tell me he had taken my advice, sought medical help, found a job, was sheltered, and was in a new relationship. Now I want to tell you about a second incident. A man pulls his vehicle onto a toll road overpass, exits, climbs the fence, and places himself over traffic zooming below. I was also the officer who responded to this incident. I was driving home that night, but I was only minutes away from the call. I could have ignored it, but one of the attributes of CIT officers and Clubhouse is just wanting to help. And at that time, I was the officer that was put in that position. I was there to help. I walked slowly and calmly to the man. He stood on the edge of the bridge and appeared lost. I introduced myself and asked him his name. Again, I expressed concern. He told me he was depressed, intoxicated, and wished to commit suicide because the mother of his children left their relationship, taking their children with her. I spoke to that man for over 30 minutes. I told him he was loved, not alone, and I would stay with him. I told him the first thing I wanted to do when he came off the bridge was to give him a big hug. And I told him I would ride with him in the ambulance, as well as stay at the hospital until he was okay. I asked him to look me in the eyes as he slowly made his way along the ledge of the bridge. He stopped several times to express continued desire to commit suicide. This seemed like an eternity before he finally arrived safely at the edge of the bridge. The man was so focused on me, he didn't even see the state troopers who had climbed the embankment behind him. I told the man not to be surprised by their presence. The troopers helped the man over the fence, and I followed through with my promise. I held him as he cried, and he also thanked me, although he was fearful of the unknown. I want to encourage officers to always use proper tactics, but I also want them to know that it's okay to show your human side. And that's what CIT and partnering with Clubhouse can do. As you can imagine, I was drained mentally and physically after returning home that night. But I received a phone call from a friend, which was unusual for that time. My friend thanked me for saving his son's life, who he identified as the man I had convinced from jumping off the bridge. Officers worldwide can fill volumes with their own stories, which over time can and does weigh on us. A component of crisis intervention training involves officers being made aware of the importance of self-care. My partnership as a law enforcement officer with community stakeholders like Clubhouse provide me an opportunity for self-care through education and interaction. Through Clubhouse, I am provided resources to de-escalate people in crisis using my relationships with experts from various professions or Clubhouse colleagues like David, who have personal experiences, who can provide peer mentorship and support for someone in crisis, as well as training me relating to best practices on how to respond. The last story I want to tell you about is about a little boy. His parents divorced when he was 2 years old. His mother quickly remarried. Father was shot and blinded soon after the divorce. Father was absent during his entire childhood. The little boy lost his mother to cancer. She was 27 years old. The boy was 10. He and his 2 siblings were left in the care of a stepfather. His stepfather remarried, bringing 3 additional children into the household. Eventually, little boy went to live with his grandparents. Well, contact with the police came at an age of 14 after he took a vehicle, wrecked it, and fled from the police on foot. I tell this story because that little boy I'm speaking of was me. And my mother's name was Ruth Ann. But if it wasn't for a South Bend police officer, Sergeant Eldon Bradley, providing tough love, who knows where I'd be today? He showed compassion, understanding, and caring. He practiced crisis intervention when formal training or an acronym for crisis intervention training had not been created. In closing, I want to challenge your community to support crisis intervention training opportunities for law enforcement officers, form a clubhouse of your own, and forge partnerships between law enforcement and clubhouses worldwide. By doing so, we can continue to break down the barriers and erase stigmas associated with those suffering mental illness and law enforcement professionals tasked with responding to mental health crisis. On behalf of Lexington House and the Goshen Police Department, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you, Jim, and it is good to have you on the board of Lexington House and president of the board there now. Thank you for that also. We're going to have another story from David George, member at Cora House. David.
Hello again. Actually, I have 2 real quick little stories for you. These differ from the first story. I want them to show what caring, compassionate, and crisis intervention trained officers act like. I was arrested once by what I consider to be a rather rough police department in a city a little to the northwest of Goshen. And I was really surprised as I was getting into the car, the officer asked me, "How are those cuffs?" And I said, "Well, I don't like cuffs." He said, "I mean, are they too tight?" And no one ever cared about that before. I told him, "Yeah, they are a little tight." And he loosened them so that I was comfortable. On the way to jail, he asked me what kind of music I liked and switched the radio station in the car to music that I liked as we went to jail. I was flabbergasted. I'd never experienced an officer who cared a whit about me, but we had conversation on the way to jail. Later on, I found out this same officer came to the homeless shelter and transported people to a church in a nearby city. He has since left that department and went back to a department that operates a little more compassionately. Recently, I had an experience with the Goshen Police Department. I've been pretty despondent over a number of things: physical pain, loss of loved ones, all kinds of things. And I had expressed to one of my friends that I wasn't saying I was going to commit suicide, but I was saying I was tired of life and it felt really hard and challenging, and maybe I'd be better off not living anymore. That concerned person called our mental health center, who sent the police department to my apartment as a wellness check. These officers had obviously been through crisis intervention training. Rather than acting like police officers and tricking me into coming out of my house or insisting on coming in right away, they talked to me through the door. I was not under threat of being arrested or in trouble. They spoke caringly and asked me what was going on and asked me if I was being truthful about not needing to go to the hospital. Didn't say anything about going to jail, offered the hospital if I wanted it, and allowed me to turn that down. When they became convinced that I was okay and was going to go to bed and try again the next day, they left. Goodbye, good night, call us if you need us, is what the officer said. Far cry from the cuff and stuff that I referred to before. Officers who just treat you roughly and figure the best way to handle any situation is get you to jail as quickly as they can. This is the true value of crisis intervention training. It serves me as a Clubhouse member in that I now know Clubhouse members can face the idea that officers are not going to just put the mental illness stigma on them, but instead will use some understanding. They will not be in such a hurry to jail as to help. This is new and unusual, but crisis intervention training is a big, big part of it.
David, how are you involved in intervention team training?
I tell my stories at one of the modules during the training, and then I allow questions and answers from the officers. They're generally entertained by me. I use police lingo since I've had so much interaction with them, and also am a radio freak. Another member of our clubhouse also tells two stories of hers, one a bad experience and one how it could have gone. Thank you.
Well, thank you, David. So across the globe, there is a growing awareness that de-escalation needs to be part of the training of police. CIT training includes this, along with education about mental illness, legal procedures for situations where it would be better to take someone to the ER rather than to the county jail. I'm going to ask for the last slide here to end the slide with a few links to CIT International and to the CIT Center at the University of Memphis, where the CIT programs sort of had their origin. So we're talking about how our clubhouse built connections and relationships with local police departments. We have members who participate by presenting a training module. We believe our involvement is a benefit to all, to our members, to the clubhouse, to the police and the police departments, and to the community. So thank you to our presenters, Francis Disori, Director at Lexington House of Elkhart, Jim Ballard, Goshen Police Department, David George, board member and member at Cora House. We're ready for Q&A. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. For those of you that have a question that you would like to submit, that you would like to ask, please submit your question in the Q&A panel located in the bottom right-hand side of your screen, or by pressing the three-dot option along the bottom and selecting the Q&A panel. Rich will be moderating our Q&A today. Our first question is, What do you think is the most important thing a clubhouse can do to make a start at improving relationships with their local police in order to reduce unnecessary conflicts between members and police?
Meet them.
Yeah, I'm going to say meet them, David says. I'm going to say the very first thing is to simply look for a way to tell the police as a part of the community about Clubhouse. What is Clubhouse? Who are you? Where are you? What are your hours? And so we began with that, of course, all kinds of community fora where we tried to find ways to tell people about Clubhouse. But we also went directly to our police department. And Francis mentioned the shift change. 20, 30 minutes in between shifts, officers who are coming off patrol come into the station house. The officers who are going on duty come in and they just sort of exchange information. What's going on? What do the officers coming in need to know? We got the opportunity to speak to shift change 3 times in a row so that all the officers on patrol knew about Clubhouse. That seemed like the place to start.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next question is for David. What impact has it had for you and other members in the clubhouse to be involved in the CIT program?
For me personally, it has gotten me back to where I was as a child in a way. My parents taught me that police officers were my friends. Through years of not being diagnosed and being a substance abuser, I came to where police were not my friends. Crisis intervention training and some interactions since then with crisis intervention trained officers have shown me that indeed the police are again my friends. Of course, I have changed a lot of things in my life as well. I am now a recovering addict rather than an active user. I have toned my temper down quite a bit, but it has made the police my friend. And for other members of the clubhouse, it certainly has lessened the impact and the fear of the police. If the police arrive on a scene, we no longer cower immediately. We feel that we are going to be in good helping hands now. And beyond that, I have made some real friendships with individual officers in the police department now.
I will just mention that the Goshen Police have also been very supportive of the warming shelter systems to address resources for people who are unsheltered in Goshen in the winter. And that has helped build relationships also.
Wonderful. We do have a quick shout out from Craig. Craig, he just wanted to say good work, Officer Ballard, and good work, David, and Indiana Clubhouse. So for our next question, what are the most important community partnerships needed for a successful CIT program?
I'm going to send that one to Francis. Francis, what are the connections that you want to have in a strong CIT committee?
So it is buy-in starting at the very core basics of like our mayor here in Elkhart, our mayor in Goshen, mayor in Appanee. There's buy-in. There's a meeting every month called the Chiefs meeting, and we now go to that meeting, Chiefs meeting of all the officers and all the places in our county that have law officers. They know about CIT, Crisis Intervention Team. So that's the second one, is the buy-in by law officers. I have to say the other part of that is members of Clubhouse. When Clubhouse came, Elkhart County Clubhouse joined the CIT ranks, the voice came in and it was an accelerant. I mentioned this at the beginning. We were missing the person who's most important. And that's the key. And I really do find much value when officers and members interact, because it's the humanity that's connected, and that's huge.
There is a slide, I don't know if you can pull up, it was slide numbered 6 or 7, that gives a list of the agencies that participate in our CIT group. It includes hospitals, it includes people from the courts, both the public defender's office and the prosecutor's office. Back one, 6. There you go. Thank you.
Not a problem. I'll keep this up when I ask my next question. How do you encourage local law enforcement agencies to participate in the program?
I'm going to hand that one to Jim Ballard. What was it that brought more departments into buy-in? I mean, we started out with the very first training, we only filled half the seats with police officers, and we brought in social workers to take some other seats. By now, we're overcommitted. All of the area police departments want in. What made the difference, Jim?
I think what made the difference, you know, like what was said in the beginning, a lot of national incidents had started to occur, and law enforcement really took an inventory of themselves and said, what can we do to de-escalate these situations so loss of life doesn't occur? And let's face it, there's a lot of liability that's associated too. So I think that's the driving force. But now that we're into it, I think it's like Francis said, it's the human spirit. It's just being a human being. I think a lot of times law enforcement officers kind of lose that, to where the human nature of it all, like, you're a law enforcement officer, you're not human. Well, we need to find that. We are human, and we have feelings just like everybody else. And that's what I talked about earlier, was just to be able to communicate. And once you start that communication, like David and I know each other, Jim and David now. I mean, if David had an incident where he needed law enforcement and I was the officer who responded, hey, David, what's going on today? And he'll say, Jim, I'm having this problem. And it's not me coming in authoritarian and saying, hi, I'm officer or corporal, or, you know, with an official title with the police department. David knows I'm a police officer when I get there. I'm wearing a badge, a gun. I got everything. I don't have to introduce myself as a police officer. But by him knowing, hey, Jim, thanks for coming today. He knows that I have best intentions. So I think that's driving it now. And for me, and this is kind of funny, I'm getting older in my career. I'm 53 years old. I can't fight like I used to. I'd rather use my mouth and de-escalate something than get in a physical confrontation.
So, Jim, I can't top that. This is Francis. One other quick piece. I do want to, we talk about partnerships that are key. Our work with our local jail, and back in the day would have been Sheriff Brad Rogers, who kind of initiated this. I'm a coordinator of CIT program here at Elkhart. My counterpart is Peter Kime. The two of us work hand in hand on this, working backwards. The jail does not want people coming to the jail who could be better treated. Who is a better partner to start this up? So when Tina came in, right after we started our partnership through the Community Mental Health Center and NAMI, they came in soon after. So big shout out to Tina. I have to make sure I share that, because I'm on a call with her tomorrow. So Tina, got it in there.
And to add to that, we talked about recidivism rates. Again, it lowers costs for your county for people to be served who are experiencing crisis or in need of mental health services, to get those outside of the jail. Now, we are very fortunate in Elkhart County that I believe we have over 90 programs at our jail to place people back in the society and to get them the help they need before they go back in to society. However, we are constantly working on those programs to make them better. It's an ongoing thing. We're always going to be trying to improve our systems.
So for any clubhouse, I would say a starting point is to simply check with your local police department, find out if they are involved in crisis intervention team training, and if you can help. Another question?
This one is for Officer Ballard. What made you take the step further from working with Clubhouse through CIT to actually becoming the chair of the board for Lexington House?
I think they tricked me. No, I had been involved with CIT and training new CIT officers for a while. And I think it's just everything like I said earlier, all the incidents that I've been involved with since CIT training and knowing the type of officer I was before. I'm one that I always want more information. And if I can add that information into my so-called toolbox, that's only going to help me as a person and as an officer. And it has. And I started to attend the steering committee meetings, and it just kind of went from there.
Wonderful. We appreciate that. The next question, as a member of Sheldon House in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and a board member, did you have colleagues and members go together to make contact and talk together with the police department?
I mean, yes, simply we had member and staff, one member, one staff went to the shift change at the police department. That was our initial contact with the local police department. When we began at the CIT committee, we again had a member and staff person both there.
We'll also invite them into the clubhouse occasionally.
As part of the CIT training, we give a tour of the clubhouse for the officers. Half of them come one morning and half go to a homeless shelter, and then they switch. So we get all the officers in training a walk-through tour at the clubhouse.
All right, thank you. And this is our last question. Can you give us examples of the topics covered in the 5-day training?
Yeah, I'll just list 3, but the brochure listed in the chat is the entire schedule of our 5-day training. So all of the modules, all of the sessions, all of the blurbs about the sessions are in that brochure. But to reduce it to 3, it is about mental health and mental illness, the brain, pharmaceuticals, mental illness. Number 2, it is about de-escalation techniques. And number 3, it is about the legal procedures around 72-hour holds and 24-hour holds and the process of handing someone off to the hospital.
If I may add to that, our CIT training is free to officers or anyone who attends. And the presenters over the years have actually wanted to present at the CIT training, and they are stakeholders. When you review, hopefully you will, our brochure, you'll see that we have physicians from the ER, we have judges, we have members of Clubhouse, we have family members who have been impacted by loved ones who have a mental health challenge. We have a large range, including from our clubhouse over in Fort Wayne, Carriage House. The VA comes over and does a nice piece with us. And this year we're partnering up with Clubhouse, hopefully, as well as the CIT program in St. Joe County, to do a very large, more regional CIT training in October. So you may want to check that out. It has been fun. And by the way, the presenters seem to have a good time, and they take away and go back to their places in our community. And they take pride in our community. It is theirs.
And just to add to that, Francis, it's a networking opportunity that once you can put a face with somebody, you can call them. I would have no problem calling David or Rich or Francis and saying, hey, I have this situation. What do you think the best way to handle it would be? It just puts a face with the person. And we know each other.
So thank you, Jim. Thank you, Francis. Thank you, David George. And thank you to all the fine techies that back up WANA. We've been glad to have this chance to promote crisis intervention team training, and we hope that this is an opportunity for your clubhouse.
I'm more available to help them if they wish to start.
Call anytime.
Wonderful. Thank you all. All right. If we have not answered your question, please send an email to the WANA webinar at fountainhouse.org. The schedule and PowerPoint will be sent to everyone directly that has attended, and the recording will be made available next week. There will be a survey on screen once the event ends. Please take a moment to fill it out and give us your feedback. Thank you for coming to the webinar, and please be on the lookout for announcements regarding our future webinars. Have a great day, everyone.